Scaring the living hell out of people, and I see it again as like, oh, let's bludgeon Trump with this new hoax. By the way, this program has always taken the coronavirus seriously, and we've never called the virus a hoax.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. Let me tell you something. This virus should be compared to the flu, because at worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
So all the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president. And sadly, it seems they care very little for any of the destruction they are leaving in their wake.
Salute to Now This for the videos that they brilliantly make on the internet all the time. Welcome, guys. What day is it, kids? It's finally Friday. No, seriously, what day is it? Today is May 8th. Welcome to episode 31 of Stir Crazy, your non-corporatized, non-partisan, no bullshit observations and hot takes, maybe some cold ones as well, about news and other such goings-ons around the world, gang, being brought to you exclusively here by The Real News. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Coming up on today's show, exactly that, which you just saw at the beginning, that mashup of all that Fox nonsensical misinformation. Guys, we're going to talk about the importance and the role of independent media and independent journalists. For example, tell your mama and daddy to please cut off MSNBC and CNN if it's not too much trouble. Because, guys, these corporate media outlets have an agenda, and the agenda is to keep us all dumb and keep us slaves to capitalism. And it is time for us to finally get free. What else are we talking about on the program? In case you did not know, the New Orleans City Council finally passed Medicare for all, okay? Now we're gonna see where it goes, but it's very clear that parts of this country are understanding that our social safety net is some straight up trash. And if we don't start to implement different measures, a lot of people are going to be ass out, as we are seeing right now with mass unemployment, so many people losing their health insurance, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic just running amok across the United States. Of course, we always want you guys to join in on the conversation. You guys keep it live and keep it cracking in the comments and in the chat. I know our social media guy, James, has had to toss some of y'all out. So, you know what I mean, that y'all keep it civil as much as possible, but we love the dialogue that happens in the chat and in the comments, so definitely keep that up. But now it's time for us to introduce our fantabulous panel. I'd like to introduce new to The Real News. He's our climate reporter here at The Real News, Aman Azhar. And of course, you know, Stir Crazy regular Lisa Snowden-McCray. She is the executive producer here at The Real News. And of course, fan favorite of left-leaning media people, progressive people. He is the founder of the Progressive Army. I call him the campaign killer. His name is Ben Dixon. Y'all know him. So thank you all so much for showing up and having this conversation with us on Stir Crazy.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, again, we're going to have to start on a somber note, because as the country has been discussing the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, there were arrests in connection to that. The father and son duo have been arrested. And of course, that doesn't mean anything as it relates to whether or not justice is actually going to happen for the Arbery family. But a shooting death that you may not have heard about this week happened in Indianapolis on Wednesday. 21-year-old Sean Reed was shot and killed by Indianapolis police. And this has sparked a lot of protests. If we could check out some of that protest footage, his family, people in the community have taken to the streets to demand justice for this young man. So part of what happened to Sean was streamed live on his Facebook page. Sean was driving around and doing what most young people do, you know, going live on their phone, either on IG or Facebook or something like that. And we have part of what happened to Sean, at least part of his Facebook stream. I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. It's more difficult to hear than it is to watch, but I think it's very important for our audience to see this, for the simple fact that police are already contradicting what actually happened to Sean. Let's take a look.
Hey, I'm finna be on motherfucking, what is this? What the fuck is this? This is Michigan? Come on. How the fuck? What street is this? I'm finna park this motherfucker to get the fuck out. On baby, what's this, Michigan and what? Michigan and what? Ace? I'm finna park this motherfucker at Ace. On 62nd in Michigan? Somebody come get my stupid ass. Please come get me. Park this motherfucker, I'm gone. Please come get me.
Oh. Fuck. Oh my God.
So that was part of the over hour-long live stream that Sean Reed recorded himself. As you heard, as he was clearly running away from police, at least 10 shots rang out and the young man is now dead. So activists in the Indianapolis community are calling for an independent prosecutor to be appointed to investigate this murder. As we said, Indianapolis police were involved. And Ben, I want to go to you first because there's a lot going on with this story, with some comments that detectives allegedly made, sort of joking about this young man's murder as they were standing over his body. I feel like these police-involved shootings and these vigilante shootings are revving up once again. This is feeling like 2012, 2013 all over again. What's your take on what happened to Sean?
It does seem like these shootings happen in clusters. It's something about every so many years we see the police start losing their minds again in terms of opening fire, vigilante justice, or quote unquote justice in their minds. But it really is just an indication of how dangerous it is out there for young black men in general, black women. You can see clearly that he was running away from the police. You can certainly, without question, logically conclude that he was not running towards the police. And so therefore, he was not an imminent threat to anyone in that situation. Now, if they couldn't catch him, that's their fault. You don't pull a gun and shoot somebody because you can't catch them. And so I'm sure that without this video, that there would be any kind of story that they would have made up, just like in this case of Ahmaud Arbery. But we're finding over and over and over again that without video, or even sometimes with video, it's hard for Black people to get justice in this country.
Lisa, so what the police are alleging is that they witnessed Sean Reed allegedly speeding, allegedly swerving, which from watching the video, and again, it's posted on YouTube, unedited, unaltered, at least it appears that way. I could possibly see where he was speeding and maybe driving recklessly because he's clearly holding his phone. At the same time, as I'm watching the video, it was clear that Sean knew he was being followed by police. But as reports have indicated, the police were following him in unmarked vehicles. It didn't sound as if there were sirens behind him. So he was aware he was being followed. But it didn't. They're making it sound as if though he was running from police. I mean, actually in a high-speed car chase away from them. How important is it that we continue to question and challenge the police accounting of things, because they have just been insistent upon lying and changing narratives to make it seem as if the victim was somehow deserving of the excessive force or brutality that they received?
Yeah, like we just got done seeing people storm, that state house? I can't remember what state it was, with guns, screaming in police faces. These are white people. So it's like there's always this weird thing where we have to parse these situations to decide what the person did wrong. But when it's a Black body, when it's a white person, the police have kid gloves on them. This situation makes me think about a situation we had here where I'm based in Baltimore, Corinne Gaines, who also was on Facebook and was killed by police with her small child next to her. And, we knew then that she had some issues that police could have, brought in some some people to help. They didn't do that. They just shot. It seems like when it's Black people, that the bullet is all there is. There's no other kind of policing options. And I don't know what else to say.
Aman, obviously, Black bodies and brown bodies are vulnerable in the United States, right? Especially given the fact that the police have been an oppressive force for hundreds of years, really, at this point. The fact that now there's more cameras, there's more ability for at least an unvarnished perspective of what happened, not just the word and accounting of the cops. Why is that so important now in 2020, more so than ever? And does it even make a difference when it comes to getting justice in these types of incidents?
I think you just hit the nail on the head with all the investment going on into dashboard cameras and body cameras, yet you continue to rely on opinions of people. That is something which is baffling for me. And another point really is the institutional dimension of all this. I mean, what are the standard operating procedures, with regards to shooting people 10 times, 15 times, 20 times? I mean, aren't there other ways of kind of just neutralizing somebody? That baffles me. And when you look at whatever standard operating protocols are there, against which all the police departments do their auditing of their staff, what do they really come out with? I mean, that's the kind of reports which I have not seen so far. So either this dimension is completely being ignored, or people are given the free hand. Once you do that, then definitely things like this would happen. But if there are internal controls on some of the barbaric, acts like this will continue to happen. So I really want to see what are the police investigations see about this. And then you get the media punditry on top of it. And then everything gets muddled. So you're right. And what happens to objectivity in situations like this? What happened to the evidence, the footage? Where does that go? That's my question as well.
Well, the problem historically has been that there are so many media outlets and reporters and journalists who want to maintain good, friendly, cozy relationships with the police and with the elected officials of a given city. And, Lisa, you're in Baltimore, Ben, you're in Atlanta. We've had these kind of incidents happen really over a very long period of time. And what tends to happen, if the cop is not criminally charged and not brought to trial, usually there's a monetary settlement with the family. And then there's a promise by police to do better. And we're going to get more funding for our city police, for more training, for more community understanding. We have spent shit tons of money on training the fucking police for 100 goddamn years. And still they behave in this way. And it's not unintentional, Ben Dixon.
Yeah, this is a historical pattern, right? I think we just cut to the chase, right? When vigilantes and police officers see Black men and Black women, but specifically Black men, they see a threat. And that's because of American culture. That's because of the dehumanization of Black people throughout American history. It was necessary for them to vilify Black people to justify slavery. And from that point all the way to today, we're still dealing with the baggage of that. Ask yourself this: when vigilantes, when these police officers, whatever color, right? But white, Black, or indifferent, when they visualize a thug in their head, or they visualize in a game of cop and robbers, you got to ask yourself, what are they fantasizing about? They're thinking about taking down a Black person in most cases and a brown person in other cases. And so when they see Black people particularly, and then they see brown people, they see a criminal of some type. And so there's a direct line between American culture, American vigilante culture, or movies, and how the depictions of villains. They're Black, they're brown, they're Black and brown men. And this is what leads to cops pulling up on a Tamir Rice and shooting him within 2 seconds without any question, because in their head, the villain is a Black man.
Lisa, I know you're in Baltimore. You've been covering Baltimore City Police. God bless you, for a number of years, because I know it's stressful, right? Just to see how the police operate in Baltimore. But they get most of the money. Most of the city's budget goes to the cops, and these cops behave horribly in the community. And the community is tired of it.
Yeah, we have whenever Baltimore makes the news, it's like never a good thing. So we've had, back when kids went to actual school, we had kids in school wearing coats and gloves and hats and, having to leave school early in the heat because we don't have heat and air conditioning, but our police force is very, very well funded. And I do want to touch back a little bit with what Aman said about kind of like training and a lot of what we keep talking about. I saw all of that. I covered the trials of the officers accused of Freddie Gray's death back when that happened about 4 or 5 years ago. So there were things that came up in that trial where some of the officers were not trained correctly, where, they brought in these commanders who had signed off on certain levels of training, and they'd actually never completed that training because they were told, you know what, just rush it through. So that's one thing. And another thing is how important perception is in this. So like both in that trial, there were times where the officers would say, we had to throw Freddie Gray in the back of this van because there were so many people around. They were just causing this commotion because they were like Black bodies around, because they were in a poor Black area of the city. And like, I live in the county with a bunch of white people around me. If something happens, there's going to be a bunch of white people that come out and be nosy, when there's not a pandemic. But they're not going to get like the same reaction to the group of Black people in the city proper. So like, these are the two things that kind of have always been there. I'm sure even before I sat in that courtroom 4 or 5 years ago. And even now, we've known this, people like me documented it and wrote it down, the NAACP, like all these people have talked about it. And it's a thing that's like you said, kind of baked in, because we see it and then don't see it. And then people keep dying.
Kim, if
I want to
may.
credit. Oh, by all means, Aman, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just want to build on to what Lisa just said. I think 2 more points. One is this militarization of the police, all the gears and gadgets and everything like that. That's actually structurally brutalizes the force. And that's a natural response when you have this kind of a disproportionate response to a situation which otherwise can be handled through more civil means. There is actually something called a more humane policing. And the second point really is that I think it's about time that all the complaints, when it comes to administration of justice, I think there has to be an independent oversight and auditing of how complaints were handled and how things were settled. I think that has to go in to have some kind of a structured correction of this kind of brutality, which is there every now and then.
A lot of times those citizens review boards get a lot of pushback, or they get people appointed who are, friends of law enforcement. Lisa, I hate to keep picking on you, but I know that this is the case in Baltimore as well.
Literally just a few months ago, someone resigned from our Citizens Review Board because they said it's ineffective. I had to write a story back after, that board was in place for Baltimore City Paper, which no longer exists because journalism is awful now, but that the mayor was supposed to be putting this board in place and she dragged her feet on it. So the whole thing has just been a cluster. And again, it's because it's supposed to be. Like, we have every available option to us to make this not be, and it is. And the other thing I think that's like a huge stumbling block for a lot of these reforms is the Law Officers Bill of Rights. So there's all these things that like police get these certain things, and then that means that the public sees less and less. And the interest right now is kind of protecting the police and making sure that those rights aren't violated while like our rights are.
From the comments, Vega831 says, this is fucking horrible. In my concealed carry course, this was a big no-no, yet police get away with this constantly. I'm assuming he means running with your gun out, which is a terrible idea. Even if you are law enforcement, if someone is running away from you, again, we saw this in South Carolina with the gentleman, his first name was Walter. Unfortunately, his last name escapes me. Was it Scott?
It was Walter Scott.
Walter Scott, who was shot in the back by the cop. And that cop actually did get prosecuted and go to jail. But, everyone raises up excellent points regarding media perception. And speaking of media perception, we have seen pretty much wall-to-wall coverage of every Reopen America rally from Lansing, Michigan to Sacramento, California, and to every place in between. But at the same time, there have been literally hundreds of actions for a variety of things, including rent strikes, including mutual aid, including workers' rights strikes that have not received nearly the same amount of coverage. I believe we have some video that we want to show there because, gang, corporate media has an agenda and they don't want to show people gathering in droves, being empowered, forcing the hands of a lot of elected officials, because the COVID virus has showed us that we live in the shithole country right here. We don't have adequate health care. We don't have adequate wages. People who are working in the medical community don't even have access to basic masks and gowns. So, Ben Dixon, I wanted to start with you because, you formed the Progressive Army, and over the past several months, you really had an amazing feat, Ben. I mean, you scooped the media who has all the resources, all the time, all the money, all the energy to dedicate to actually pursuing truth and vetting people. In this case, you pulled the rug out of Michael Bloomberg's $1 billion campaign. You need to be a Negro Hall of Fame first ballot for that one, sir. But I want you to sort of detail that process for us. And why it was important for you to expose Mike Bloomberg in this way, and then the way that the mainstream media reacted to you after it happened.
Yeah, it was important to do that specific work because of what Mike Bloomberg represents in this country. He's literally the ruling elite. Right? You may have about 6 or 7 other people richer than him in this country. So he's quite literally the ruling elite coming down from the pantheon of the oligarchs, coming down to stop the unwashed masses from getting anything from this government. And I think it connects directly to what you're talking about in terms of the agenda of the corporate media. They are there to protect the ruling elite from any responsibility to the masses. And that's the agenda of the ruling elite. That's the agenda of the millionaires that they fund on television. That's the agenda of both political parties. The best opportunity we had probably was Bernie Sanders, but even Bernie Sanders to a certain degree is complicit with this Democratic Party. And so we have a dilemma on our hands, not even so much a dilemma as much as a fight. We're not only fighting against money, we're fighting against the propaganda that money funds. And that comes in the form of corporate media. And we are the underdogs, man. It's like we see right now that there's a consensus across all of the media. There's at least both political parties in terms of reopening America. You had Governor Cuomo in New York. He started with that same language as well. And so it wasn't until there was a backlash from the people where we said, hell no, we're not dying for Wall Street, that you saw the Democrats start backing away from that. But at the very beginning of the question of whether or not we're opening up America, even Joe Biden sent out a video our plan rather, discussing how we were going to open America again. And so that was the messaging sent down from the ruling elite, including Michael Bloomberg, that us poor people, we got to get out here and start making the money again, even if it means some of us are going to die. So it's not just the media, it's the politicians, as well as the oligarchs who are sitting on their thrones, looking to us to go out there and not only give them our labor, but to give them our consumption so that they can continue to hit their quarterly profit margins. And if it's not for independent media, I don't know who's going to challenge that.
Lisa, you come from independent media. Well, you come from a myriad of media experience. Talk to us about what it was like when you were working on the Baltimore City paper. What was the undoing eventually of the City paper? And detail for us, if you could, this talk about the Baltimore Sun being sold and possibly purchased by local ownership, possibly becoming a nonprofit.
Sure. So I came to City Paper at the end of its run. City Paper lasted about 40 years. It started out as an independent, very in your face, cussing, all of that. And then it was bought out by Tribune media. So then we were very much under the sun. We were literally in the same building as the Sun. My colleague, Brandon Soderberg, who was my editor at the time, was kind of, telling us a little bit at a time, like, things were cut a lot. And, first we kind of lost our own dedicated sales folks. We lost a lot of money that we used for freelancers. We weren't getting paid very well. So it was kind of like this whittling down of it until finally we were told, oh, sorry, we got to shut it down. And the thing that Brandon has always maintained is that he knows that, see, it wasn't that city paper wasn't profitable. It wasn't profitable enough for the owners of Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
So while this is happening, there's lots of stuff going on at Tribune. For a while, it was trunk, which was hilarious to a lot of journalists because, like, what the hell is a trunk? But also, like, there's sexual harassment allegations. They're giving out golden parachutes to folks. So the money is there. They're just not giving it to the reporters. So right now at the Sun, it's gone from, okay, we've consumed this other entity. We've consumed a lot of other smaller papers that Tribune and the Sun kind of own. A lot of smaller community papers no longer exist or are skeleton crews. And that's also been reflected in the Sun. So they don't, I may be wrong, but I don't think they don't do any real freelancing. Over the years, they've had a lot of buyouts. So a lot of the staff is, the older staff is my age, which is not a great thing in journalism because you want to have the reporters that have the institutional knowledge, that understand the city, that understand literally like, okay, well, yeah, this happened in 2020, but that's a result of legislation that was passed in like 1989, 1975, and this is why these things matter. So the hope is that some kind soul or souls will come and rescue the Sun from the ever strangling clutches of the trunk Tribune kind of whatever control, and then put it back in the control of the actual people who care about Baltimore City. So that's what's going on with that.
Aman, I know that you have international media experience in your background. I just learned that about you today. So you have a very unique perspective, separate from the rest of us. And I'm curious, I feel like it's not exclusive to American media, but I feel like American media does it worst and or best, depending on how you're looking at it. But U.S. corporate media pumps up the American people so much to make us believe that we are the best country in the world. There is no one out there doing it better than us across the board. Best healthcare system, best, means of, providing for its people. Because I think majority of Americans have no fucking clue how it is in the rest of the world. I mean, maybe not even interested in how the rest of the world operates, but is still convinced that we have the best system in place right here. What is your take about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Kim, you're right on that, and I think this is because there's so much of a power and concentration within the hands of the few. I mean, let's just say, even from within the United States, academically speaking, and I'm no Chomskyan, but look at the manufacturing, consent thesis for that matter. Which in like 10 years ago was upgraded by another professor now with the University of Sydney, who kind of improvised it and said, okay, this is now MINDNET, which is Military Industrial Media Entertainment Network. The point is that it's now the same end of the same curve. It's on the one hand, you have a military force, you have a military industrial complex, and on the other softer side, you have entertainment industry, and these are the subsidiaries. So when you don't have independent media to kind of challenge that kind of a mainstream opinion being bombarded through television networks 24/7, this is what happens. And the other side is the consumption of media. Are we also having people who are into, democratically debating and challenging everything? No. There's so much of punditry going on that everybody is now interested in having opinions around. Whatever happens to the good old journalism when you would actually get real documents and then you would come back to your newsroom and say, hey, I have the documents. What happened to all that? And even if it's there, nobody's probably interested, or at least it doesn't come to the top. So I think it's both ends of the curve. But that is why I think independent media is so much important, because now it has to watch for the interest of the public and also kind of get into that debate of challenging the mainstream.
Well, Aman, then I have to ask your opinion then. And I want to ask this of the entire panel, but Aman, I want to start with you. Who's doing it the best, aside from the real news, of course? But I mean, who else do you like out there? Whose reporting do you trust? Whose voices do you find credible?
I think that's an interesting question. And being a journalist myself, of course, I don't give any clean chit to anyone, no matter how much I like or adore, for that matter. Be it Intercept, and I liked Intercept. Counterpunch, I like them too. Mother Jones, I like their reporting. But nonetheless, when I look at news pieces or opinions, the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, well, where can I see if there's any bias, any propaganda, any disinformation? All these things get so much embedded into different opinions and news pieces these days that you really have to be careful. And yet, at times, I end up digesting things which are utter lies. So that's the point. I mean, we have to have people with their critical mindset, critical lens on all the time. It's tough, it's demanding, but there is no other way of doing it.
Ben Dixon, who are some of the voices and outlets that you find trustworthy and credible?
I'd like to answer that question in a similar vein as Aman. I think it's critical that we don't really have any outlet that we trust. Don't trust anybody. I tell my audience all the time, trust me as far as you can judge for yourself, right? I challenge them to question what I say. I question myself, and sometimes in my show. Anybody who listens to my show, you know that if I have an opinion at the beginning of the show, doesn't mean that I haven't talked myself out of it by the end of the show, because we have to question everything. We need to question our own internal biases. We got to question our own worldview and our own framework. If we don't have that critical analysis skill, then we will take an outlet that we trust, right, and that we're a fan of, because unfortunately there's a small step in American culture from being a fan to trusting someone, and from trusting someone to being a fan. And once you fall over into being a fan, then that outlet could slide some biases in the conversation. So I would say, honestly, don't trust anybody. Just take every single story by story and leave it there.
Lisa, who do you go to get your news that you find valid and incredible?
I mean, I think that Ben and Aman kind of named all the big names. One thing that I also wanted to talk about, though, was in addition to the real news, I also have kind of a smaller independent news outlet that I run. And in that, I really meet a lot of other people who are doing the same thing. The last conference that I went to before they closed outside was the Lion Conference in Tennessee, the local independent online news association. And this is just like broke ass people, in South Carolina, in Michigan, and all over the country, who have seen the absence of kind of like good and important news coverage and just said, fuck it, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Like these tiny news outlets that are trying to figure it out and living on like a shoestring budget and like pushing the boundaries on what journalism is and isn't, and how to make it better and how to reach people. And that's really like beyond like obviously what I ingest every day. Like those are the things that I'm kind of keeping in the periphery as well, because even though they're tiny now, like I don't think that those kind of things are going away. The world of online independent news is not going away. It's just changing. And like, so that's, I guess, also what I think about when I think about where I'm getting my news from.
We have some comments from the comments. Schultze 100, friend of the show. He says exactly, or they say exactly. It's not even journalism a lot of the time. It's just people's feelings, opinions, and how stuff should affect on some emotional level, or the news talking about how bad other news is. Well, I mean, there is a lot of bad news out there, gang. I mean, it's not just literally the news of the day, which is horrible from day to day. even before this pandemic erupted. But there are not only bad takes, but just bad framing, I think is really what's my problem with a lot of the mainstream outlets. I want to move on because something interesting happened out of New Orleans. So we know that Louisiana has been one of the hardest hit states as it relates to the pandemic in COVID-19, but their city council took some unusual measures. And this is from citizen.org, Public Citizen. They're reporting that the New Orleans City Council unanimously approved a resolution in support of the Federal Medicare for All Act of 2019, as well as the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act, which would guarantee all residents full coverage for medically necessary health care without any out-of-pocket costs from now until a COVID-19 vaccine is widely available to the public. And they are not the only cities that have done this. Detroit, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco have passed similar resolutions in support of Medicare for all. Ben Dixon, this was obviously the main thing that Senator Bernie Sanders ran on for his presidential attempt, second attempt at the White House and to capture the Democratic nomination. Now, the person who is probably going to be the nominee, Joe Biden, does not seem to be quite on the Medicare for all boat yet. But it always seems as though localities, local governing bodies or governors or, mayors, these people are the ones who tend to lead on these types of, socialism reform kind of issues. And the federal government might come around later on. But what is your take on New Orleans joining these collection of other cities to say that, no, our residents deserve Medicare for all right now?
Yeah, I think it's the baseline. I think it's the starting point. I'm glad they did it, and I don't want to knock them and say it's not enough. But to be honest with you, we're 70 years behind the curve, 71 years. The UK got their single payer style system back in 1949. So congratulations. I'm glad that we're making that progress. But we see some of the opposition to that across the country, even when states like California passed their Medicare for all system or their single payer system, the opposition came from the Democrats there. So, I'm glad that they're making this attempt. I like to see it in practice. And even in practice, I do believe that this is the baseline for human rights. Like we are the richest country. And yet we're the country where people are dying because they can't get insurance or they can't get care, and they can't get care because they don't have money. So I think it's a good thing. Congratulations to them. I wish we had that here in Atlanta. That would be great. But, still, this just shows you how far behind America is behind the curve. Intentionally so, by the way, intentionally so.
You ain't never lied about that. From the comments, Steely Steve says, listen to those that oppose your views. Otherwise, you'd never grow. Easy to only listen to like-minded folks. Yep, we agree with that. But as it relates to what New Orleans did, Lisa, Public Citizen is reporting that 30% of New Orleans residents or Louisiana residents have unpaid medical debt. We know that is a major reason why people file bankruptcy. Louisiana also has some of the worst racial health disparities in the nation, with Black folks having shorter life expectancies and suffering from a lot of treatable conditions, more so than their white counterparts. I mean, for Medicare for all, this is not the first time that this has been said, but this is a racial justice issue. And that's part of the reason why I'm not sure if it's actually going to get implemented, because Black folks would be lifted up by it.
Right. Like, yeah, definitely. I think, wasn't there a quote where some woman was like asked if she would get Obamacare, and she was like, no, because it said Obama on it. Like, white people would generally in this country seem to want to cut off their own nose to spite their face. And not just Republicans, as Ben pointed out, like Democrats kind of, I think, in Bernie Sanders and as far as he came, and even Elizabeth Warren, kind of have a mandate, I think, from the American people, but they seem super interested in ignoring that. So it's good that people are slowly realizing that we need that, but I'm not optimistic, unfortunately.
Aman, I mean, you've lived in places that have universal healthcare system. I always ask people, who are coming from abroad to the US, first of all, why did you come here? Because don't you want to go back to a place that is governed by, sane people? So it's always shocking to me when I'm like, why are you here? It's probably way better than where you came from. America is nuts right now. The fact that most Americans don't have health care coverage, I know is shocking to most people who live outside of this country.
Well, I've consumed a lot of cultural propaganda as well. So it's only when you actually come and live in a place you realize, okay, what the realities on the grounds are. But this is right. I mean, and especially in terms of this pandemic, it's so revealing that, and at the same time, the state allows the private sector to kind of create all that growth scenario, and then when pandemic or a crisis happens, they fail. Mm-hmm. Then the states jump in and bail private sector out and let them, okay, you take care of this again. What kind of a joke is that? I mean, does it even make any sense? And I'll be a little cynic with this healthcare situation as well, which is because if you're going to send people to work, of course you're going to assure them that, no, we have your back, go work. So if something happens, we'll take care of you. So that's an economic necessity as well. Whether that ties into a long-term political agenda, I am a little bit of a skeptic with regards to that. That's why this conversation is important.
I mean, gang, it definitely appears that, our corporate overlords and their political lackeys are like determined not to learn a fucking thing from this pandemic, right? Like they are hell bent on back to business as normal, business as usual. And I feel as if that like this is our moment to make a stand, be like, nope, I like going outside and breathing much cleaner air. Now, how are we going to allow people to still breathe clean air? I don't know. We got to figure it out. But we can't, I feel like we can't go back right now. But we're being pushed and forced back, Ben. I mean, what is the recourse of the people, in your opinion, in this moment?
The only thing that we can, there are strikes that are happening, labor strikes, but for those of us who are at home, I'm really encouraging consumer strikes. Like, why the hell are we giving these people any money at this point? Like any of these operations, any money, because we're funding our own demise. These bastards are going to send us out. They want us to go out and consume so that they can hit their quarterly profit margins. The ruling class of this country has made it clear that we are expendable, that they will sit back and watch. We already are near 100,000 people dying. Right. We'll be at 100,000 probably before the end of next week. And they're talking about 3,000 people a day. They don't care. They want you to go out and consume and buy shit. OK, so to me, it's like the biggest weapon that we have is to refuse to give them any money above what we need to survive. If obviously we're going to need food to survive. So buy food, but you don't need that second subscription. You don't need Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus and Amazon Prime. Like, let's take our money back because that's our strength. That's our power. And that's how we can crush them and bring them to their knees if enough of us. And I'm talking about tens of millions of us, 50 million people. If we refuse to give them our cash, then we can bring them to their knees. But they're counting on us being addicted to consumption. And I'm telling you, consumerism is a hell of a drug. It's going to be hard to ask people to not go out and buy those finer things and have Amazon delivering to their doorsteps every single day. But when we're talking about life or death situations, they're trying to send us out to the mall to die. And the more money we give them, the more we fuel them with the ammunition that they need to demand us to go out there and into the middle of a plague to buy some damn ice cream.
Lisa, Ben just said something that sort of sparked a thought in my head. As we're over 70,000 people dead from COVID-19 in a stunningly short amount of time, the country's beginning to reopen, and these plans are, being debated about. But at the same time, I feel as if we are somewhat either desensitized or callous, or maybe it's the way it's being reported. But 70,000 people dead in less than 3 months in the United States from something that is semi-preventable, at least. Have we been so accustomed to mass death that I don't think that we are actually processing like how astounding that is?
I don't think so. I mean, if you look at the polls that are released, like most Americans want to stay home. Most Americans are in favor of preventive things like wearing masks and wearing gloves and listening to doctors. It's just like the most powerful people be the loudest, and the most powerful people, as Ben just said, want us to go to work and own, and in Jeff Bezos's case, own the Washington Post. In Bloomberg's case, owns Bloomberg News, and can kind of push this message out. Even like when we go back to these rallies that have been happening with white people that are drastically poorer than Jeff Bezos and Bloomberg, they're still white. So that small amount of white people who have decided that they also want to die for Jeff Bezos are louder than any other people in this country, like, unfortunately. So, and the last thing I want to say is, it burns me up that Amazon, like, I am apparently addicted to Hulu and Netflix, and I'm sorry, Ben, but like, what I see when I'm watching my shows is every 5 seconds there's a commercial for Amazon with like the sad pianos of we understand in these difficult times. And I know because of the great reporting we've been doing at Real News, Jessel North specifically has been doing a great job. Because of the great reporting elsewhere, I know that they're not paying these people or buying them PPEs. Right. So like, why are you investing money in convincing me, in this sad slow motion commercial when y'all could be helping the actual people? And I'm done. Because they're
fucking evil. These people are evil bastards. I'm sorry. Like, I don't mean to interrupt, but the reason is like, and actually, you said it earlier, it's not as though there wasn't enough money in those newspaper outlets to pay the journalists. It was that, I think you said it wasn't enough money to satisfy the owners. And so the same thing is happening in Amazon. Like, I will never forget that sentence that you just said, because it's so critical. Same thing is happening in Amazon. They can afford to pay these people hazard pay. They can afford to give them PPE, but they have calculated the cost of people dying versus giving the entire company PPE. And they have made a conscious decision to let a certain percentage of people die versus PPE. And then they'll make up the difference with advertising revenue. We're dealing with some really evil, sadistic people, and I think we have to really come to terms with that before we know how to proceed in this era.
Yeah, the thing that I keep saying, and I'm sorry, I don't want to step on your toes, Kim, but like, if we didn't know what evil was, I think that we kind of, at least for me, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up watching like cartoons. Like, there was the bad guy who looked bad. Like, evil doesn't look like that. Evil looks like the stuff that we're seeing in front of our faces. And I think that's something that, like, for a lot of us, is super hard for us to wrap our brains around.
It is.
That a man can have on a nice suit and smile and comb his hair and still be like, you can die, today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think if I may, I think this goes back to the point that we were having a discussion over earlier. I mean, when you blindly trust in something, be that your municipality, your police department, or a government, this is what happens. Of course, they have their own interest. That is why this social contract works both ways. I mean, the people do have to engage to be able to get back that kind of a sovereignty, which has been now given to all these political entities who also have their corporate and political interests, which kind of go into the public consciousness through all these media networks. And that's why corporatization and profiteering from such criminal behavior is now a norm. I mean, this is unbelievable, actually, that to have this kind of a behavior where people are actually dying, and there's enough money going on, enough money around to feed everyone, and yet it's perfectly acceptable to continue with this way. So definitely there is something, everybody knows something is not right. That's why that critical engagement has to happen, and that is why independent voices, independent media is so crucial today than ever before.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for us as media people. Like, we have to get in the mix too, right? I mean, along with all the mutual aid things that are happening, people who have platforms and who are visible, you have to amplify these things, man, because people out there needing help, needing access to resources, and sometimes they don't know where to find it. They don't think to watch the local news, or maybe even the local news is not giving them the information for them to access it. So definitely independent media. And for y'all out there watching, okay, tell a friend to tell a friend. You got to drop some coin for your independent media and your independent journalists, y'all, because journalism isn't cheap. Okay, people have to travel. If you're requesting documents, sometimes there's cost involved with that. Obviously, you have to eat. Don't mistake visibility of a person to assume that maybe that they got money or there's regular monies coming in, right? Because it's a job just like anything else. And if you're working for yourself, or if you're working for a smaller outlet, that pie is a lot smaller. So if there's outlets out there whose voices that you like and whom you trust and whom you find credible, try to drop them some coins if you can. I know it's tough out there right now, but it's so important that these voices are heard and are able to work on behalf of the interest of the people. So, gang, I think that's going to wrap up our hour of Stir Crazy on this here Friday. I'd like to thank the fantastic panel for stopping by, as always. Lisa Snowden-McCray, Aman Azhar, and of course, my guy, Ben Dixon. Ben, thank you so much. You know I'm a big fan. Ben, you are the campaign killer, dog. I will forever, I will always hold you in high esteem and high admiration, because Mike Bloomberg is such a piece of shit. And you got him up out the paint, Ben. So, I mean, again, y'all see Ben Dixon in the streets, y'all salute him from a nice, safe social distance. You know what I mean? Because that man put in some work on this campaign, bro.
Ben needs to come to Baltimore because Mike Bloomberg has a very firm and influential hand on what happens here, especially with Johns Hopkins and Johns Hopkins police force.
Hey, as soon as this pandemic is over, I'm going to be everywhere. I've been in this house for 2 whole months, so
we'll get you some crabs. We'll get you some steamed crabs.
For sure. But thanks for, hey, listen, and can I just echo one thing? Please support the Real News Network. You guys have been thorough. Long before I even came on the scene, you guys were doing the damn thing. So I encourage everyone who can to become a member and support this channel.
Thank you, Ben. You did that better than me. I don't even think I told people to do that yet on Stir Crazy. So Ben out here trying to take my job too, y'all. No, I'm playing. Listen, gang, don't forget, also Monday, we're going to try something new here on Stir Crazy. We are going to try to let people call in on Zoom or Skype. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to give it a shot because fuck it. We take risk out here. We just going to go for it and see,
I'm not going to be on the show
goes.
I love it.
I know, right? Yes, that's how you walk on the wild side in media, gang. You go live with your audience. But everybody take care. Have a fantastic weekend. Please remain safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I said like and subscribe. And we'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend, y'all. Stir Crazy.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Aman. You were great.